Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is the next video wherein we are going to discuss a very important topic of Java, which is called as comparable and comparator. So I'll be making two separate videos for that. One is for comparable and the second one is for the comparator. In this video, we'll be discussing about the comparable, that what exactly it is, why do we need it, what is exactly the use of it, and also the examples in detail. So firstly, to start with comparable, I will be using the reference of Geeks for Geeks as well in this video, and I will be taking that example as well, so that you can have a follow through with, and you can have the article in your hand and you can read that in detail as well. So I'll be explaining you the example which is given over there itself, and then we will be able to see the implementation of that as well. So without further ado, let's get into the system and see the example, what it is trying to say. So let's first of all understand why exactly comparable is required. Comparable is basically required when you want to compare the different objects. So let's try to understand firstly that what exactly happens in a very simple example. So let's say if I'm just having this particular list, which I'm going to be creating over here, and that is going to be having the integer kind of a data type, right? So that means in my list, it's a dynamic array, and I will be just adding the numbers over here so that it's going to be having certain numbers inside of it, and based on that we can sort the data. So over here, if I'm just adding this particular numbers over here, right, inside of this particular list, then what exactly is going on over here? So all these numbers which I'm going to be adding over here, these are basically the objects which has been passed, and these objects are basically the objects of this particular class, integer class, that is mentioned over here, because this list is going to be containing the objects of the integer class, right? So if I'm just using this method collections.sort, and I'm passing my list over here, then it's going to be able to sort this particular data, right? It's a very simple thing. As of now, we haven't done anything over here. It's just a simple implementation, that is to sort the data which we have passed on to the list. So over here, let me first of all just this thing run. Okay. So firstly, I'll just comment this out and see what's going to be the output over here that we're going to be getting. So if I'm just commenting this out, and let's see what's the output which is going to be coming over here. So it's just giving us the numbers that to be in the random fashion, right? It's not giving us any kind of a proper output over here. But at the same time, if I'm just mentioning this collections.sort, so it's going to give, okay, so this has to be collections. And if I'm just implementing this thing over here, now I'll be getting the data in a sorted way. Let's see the output. You can see that data is now arranged in a proper fashion. It's in the sorting method over here. And now why exactly it is able to understand this collections.sort is now, it's because Java is basically what, it's just the kind of instruction that we have to pass on, because it's a dumb machine, right? It doesn't know how the numbers are and what exactly the numbers are. It's just able to understand these are of integer class and these are the objects. But at the same time, when we mention this collections.sort, it's able to understand we have to sort the data, and that to be in a proper increasing order. So that's how it was able to understand this particular thing. But at the same time, so I'll show you this with the example, but at the same time, now that we have understood this particular thing, but at the same time, let's try and do a different kind of an implementation. If I'm just creating a class that to be of movie, and so this integer is basically just a single type of the data type, and that's the reason it was able to understand that we have to sort this particular information. But now if I'll be having 2-3 different types of the data type over here, like in the movie class that I'm going to be creating. So this is the same example which has been given on the Geeks for Geeks as well, and I will be using that thing only. So one is my rating, and the second one is basically, let's say, the year when the movie was released, and the third one will be like the string, the name of the movie, right? So this is the same example. If you will see on the Geeks for Geeks, you'll be able to follow through with this. So now this, I have to make the constructor over here so that I can add certain values over here, int year, and this is going to be my string, the name of the movie, right? So this dot rating will be equals, and this dot name will be equals name, and this dot year will be equals to year. So now that we have created this class and this is my constructor, so what I'll do over here, I'll just make a list over here with different kind of a data type. Okay, so this is gonna be, okay, let's just keep it as simple. We will call this and see the output over here as well. So this is gonna be my list 1, and I will create a separate list so that I can pass on the information for that particular one over here, right? So I will be calling this as list. Let me just copy that from here. List, and this is going to be my movie. So this time I will be passing on the objects of the movie class. So initially when we were doing the sorting thing, we were just using the integer type of the data types, and that's the reason it was very simple for us to sort the data. But at the same time, this time movie class has been passed on to this particular list, and I will call this as list 2, and I will be just adding certain information so that we can work on that particular thing. And we'll call this as new movie, and I have to pass on the values to my constructor. So what's the rating, year, and name of the movie? Rating is going to be, let's say 3, year, let's say 2000, and the movie name is something called as let's say Titanic, and let's pass on at least 5. And next movie, I will be just keeping this as 2022, and this will be 2122, and this is gonna be like, let's say 1990, and let's say this to be as 2200, right? Just for instance, and just change the ratings over here. So let's say 7, this is gonna be 1, and this is gonna be like 0, and let's say this to be as 23, just the random numbers. Okay, and let's say the movies name are like Interstellar, and let's say Martian, and this is gonna be like Spider-Man, and let's say this to be as Krish, right? So these are basically the different items that we have added. So now just take a look over here that what exactly we are doing. This list is basically of movie class, right? We are passing on the movie class over here, and we're going to be adding the objects of this particular class only. So this means we are having 3 different data types. So now if I'll try to just sort this particular information, so what's going to happen? You will see the error coming up because it's not going to be able to understand that how exactly it needs to sort the data. So if I'll try to sort my list too, because I also have to pass on this thing, because so if I'll just run this particular program, you will see the error coming up because it's not going to be able to understand how exactly it has to sort this particular information, which is having 3 different data types, right? So we have to create certain kind of a method, and some kind of an implementation has to be there so that it's going to be able to understand how it has to sort this particular information. So for that thing, we have something called as comparable, which is defined in our Java, right? And what exactly it does, I'll show you the implementation first, and then I will explain you how exactly it is basically done. So this is something called as the syntax. So if you know that what exactly interface is, then you will be able to understand that how exactly it is happening. So this movie class, so this comparable is basically the something called as the interface, and it is having a method called as compare2, which is gonna do the job which we want to do, right? So you can see that this comparable is basically this class is gonna be implementing this comparable interface, and whatever the methods, whatever the declarations that we have inside of this comparable method, this interface is going to be something called as defined in this particular class only. So I'll just mention the method, I'll just define the method which is there in this comparable interface, and based on that it's going to be able to do the job which we want to do. So let me write the code first, and then I will explain you the things in detail, that how exactly it is done. So previously, when we were having only single data type, it was easier if for the system to, just sort the data. But this time we have to mention certain things, because we are having three different types of the information. One is basically the rating that we have. Second thing that we have is the year when the movie was released. And the third thing is basically something called as the name of the movie. So we have to define a certain way, like whether the data has to be sorted based upon the year the movie got released, and also like if you want to sort the data based upon the rating that the particular movie has, right? So this is something which has to be defined. So we'll be just mentioning this thing only, that we are implementing the method which we have inside of this comparable interface, and we are defining this method inside of this particular class, right? So whichever class or whichever class is implementing the interface, it has to define its method. So this comparable method is interface is basically having this compare to method, and that's going to be defined over here. So how exactly it's going to be defined? We will be having something called as the object of movie, and this is going to return. So it's basically going to be having the integer type of return type. So that's what we have to keep in our mind. So whatever the value that's going to be passed, so I'll tell you how exactly it is happening. So if I want to rate just sort the data based upon the ratings that we have, so I'll mention that thing as over here, and this dot rating. So that's how it's basically done. And the next thing which I need to do, I need to print this particular thing, because now it's going to be able to understand, because now the method has been defined. So I'll tell you how exactly it is happening and what exactly is the meaning of this particular thing. But before that, let me print the output. So I'll create for loop for each loop, and it's going to be having movie, and I will call this as obj, and this is going to be taking the data from list 2, and so this thing has to be printed now. So system.out.println, and that will be having my obj dot name of the movie plus space plus obj dot rating plus space plus obj dot year when the movie got released plus this thing, and I will just create a new line over here. So let me now execute this particular program, and you will see that the data will be sorted. As you can see that Interstellar, which is having the rating as 7, it's at the top, and the Titanic, which is having the rating as 3, it's in the second place, 1 0, right? So that's how. Okay, so it's basically giving us some kind of a this thing. So I'll have to just create a new line over here so that it can be done properly. Okay, so now you can see that Krish, which is having the highest rating, which is 23, it's basically at the top. So you can see that these two different lists are basically having two different data written, and this is the output that we are getting. So initially, when we were having only single data type, we were simply using the collections.sort, as you can see that, and that we just simply printing out the data, and it was able to give us the output without any kind of an error. But in the list 2, what we have done, in the list 2, we have passed on certain different types of the elements that's of the class movie, right? You can see 3 different data types which has been written over here because of the class implementation. So now when we were trying to initially just sort this particular information, system was not able to understand that. It was asking for us to like, how exactly should I sort the data? So we just mentioned something very unique inside of this class only, that you need to sort the data based upon the ratings of the movie, right? So we just mentioned this particular thing. And how do we do that? We use the implementation of this comparable interface. So this comparable interface was something which was used, that is to sort the data, right? That's what we used over here. So this particular thing, when we use this comparable interface, because interface is basically only having the declarations in them, right? So we need to define the method which is inside of this comparable interface. So that's what we did. So comparable is basically having the method, a unique method that is to sort the data, sort the objects to itself, right? So whatever the object that we have passed of movie class over here, so like, you know what happens in sorting, the different elements are being compared to each other, right? So over here we are having different objects. So you want to compare that. So how exactly it is done? So this particular thing which is mentioned over here, that you can see this particular implementation which is there. This compare to is basically taking an object over here which is of movie class, right? So whatever the object which is coming over here, right? So let's say the very first object which is coming over here is of Krish, right? So Krish object is going to be coming over here. So m dot rating is basically something which we have used. M dot rating is going to be pointing to number 23. So 23 will be getting subtracting something. So this dot rating is something going to be the object of basically which is pointing to. So you can see the definition over here. Let me show you the definition, how compare to works. So this is also mentioned on the implementation part, that basically comparable is having a unique you can say the definition, or you can say implementation, that a comparable object is capable of comparing itself with another object. So it's going to be able to understand that it has to compare the object with some other object with itself, right? So this dot rating is going to be compared with the different object which is going to be passed over here, and that's how it's going to be giving us the value. So based on that, if these two will be subtracting, I mean, it's going to be getting subtracted over here, and it's going to return some kind of a value, and based on that the sorting is going to happen. If that's going to be positive, then definitely the object which is pointing to, it's going to be greater than that of this object which has been passed over here, and based on that our data is going to get sorted at the end. I hope it makes sense to you. Just write the code, try to read through, and you will be able to understand the functionality of this particular thing. And let me just do this thing over here. So over here we have just done the comparison based upon the ratings, and if I'll have to just mention this thing over here, that it has to sort the data based upon the year that the movie got released. So you will see the sorting done in a different way, right? You can see 2200 at the top, 2120, it's a decreasing order. Like if you will just put this over here and M over here, it's going to be in the increasing order. And over here, it's basically, the sorting is basically done in the decreasing order. 2200 at the top, 2120, 2022, 1990 at the bottom, right? So this is what the implementation of this comparable is. And there is a limitation that we have that's going to be solved in the next video in the comparator. That comparable is only capable of sorting the data which has been defined over. You can see that if year has been mentioned inside of this class, every time I will be using this collections.sort, it's going to be sorting the data based upon the year, right? We will not be able to use the rating again. We have to do the modification again and again in the class. We have to go to the class again and we have to modify the code. That's how we'll be able to change this particular thing over here, right? So that's what we're going to be solving in the next video for the comparator. I hope this code makes sense to you, and just try to implement this. It's a very simple concept. Just a little bit of exercise is required and you will be able to get the logic. So yeah, that's it in this video. See you in the next video wherein I'll be explaining you the comparator thing. All right, see you next time. Thanks for watching.